David Carver's return home from the grocery store was usually uneventful, but today, he couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling as he approached the street. Something was different. A large moving truck was parked outside the house next door, which had been empty for months. Curiosity piqued. David slowed his car to a crawl, watching as figures moved furniture into the house. As he parked his car and unloaded his groceries, he couldn't help but glance over. His new neighbor was coordinating the movers with a calm authority. She was striking, tall, with skin shimmering like polished sapphire and hair cascading down her back in a torrent of luminescent blue waves. Her presence was commanding yet graceful, almost otherworldly. David hesitated, then walked towards a fence that separated their yards. He leaned against it, trying to appear casual. "Hey there, looks like you're moving in," he called out, raising his voice to be heard over the clatter of moving boxes. The woman turned, her eyes a piercing silver that seemed to reflect the light. "Yes, just arrived today. I'm Nix," she replied, her voice melodic yet clear. "I'm David. Welcome to the neighborhood." He extended a hand, which she shook gently. Her touch was cool, her grip firm. "It's usually quiet around here. You'll have peace, that's for sure." "Peace is exactly what I'm looking for," Nick said, smiling slightly. "It's a beautiful area, so green and tranquil." "Definitely. If you need anything or have questions about the area, feel free to ask. Us neighbors should stick together, right?" David offered, feeling a strange mix of wariness and intrigue. "Thank you, David. I might take you up on that." "Settling in is always the hardest part," she replied, turning her attention back to the movers. As David walked back to his house, he felt an odd sensation, like a magnetic pull towards Nick's. Shaking his head, he dismissed it as nothing more than curiosity about his mysterious new neighbor. He unpacked his groceries, but his mind kept drifting to the woman next door. Her image lingered in his thoughts, not just her striking appearance, but the air of mystery that surrounded her. Why did she move here? What was she looking for in this secluded neighborhood? Determined to clear his head, David decided to take a walk later that evening. As he strolled past Nix's house, he saw her standing in the garden under the twilight sky, seemingly admiring the serene landscape. "Getting settled in all right?" David called out as he approached the fence again. Nix turned, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the setting sun. "Yes, thank you. It's more beautiful here than I expected. The peace, it's soothing." "I'm glad to hear that. It's quiet, but we like it that way. Helps you think, you know." David leaned on the fence, watching her expression. Nix nodded. "Indeed, it does. And the stars here, they're quite vivid. It's a nice change of pace. Never took much time to stargaze myself, but maybe I should start," David mused, following her gaze upwards. "You know, there's a local astronomy club that meets up every now and then. If you're interested, I could get you the details." "That would be lovely," Nix replied, her eyes sparkling with genuine interest. "Thank you, David. It's comforting to have a friendly neighbor." As David walked back home, he realized that despite his initial reservations, he was looking forward to learning more about Nix. There was something undeniably captivating about her, and for the first time in a long while, he felt a genuine interest in connecting with someone new. However, a small part of him remained on guard, reminding him that in a world as complicated as theirs, things were seldom what they seemed. The next morning, David woke with the thought of his new neighbor, Nix, still lingering in his mind. As he sipped his coffee, he peered through the window and saw her wandering in her garden, seemingly lost in her own world. The image of her serene face from the evening before sparked an unusual curiosity in him. Deciding to act on this feeling, David made his way next door after breakfast. He found Nix kneeling in her garden, her hands delicately tending to the flowers. "Morning, Nix. You're an early riser, I see," he greeted, leaning on the wooden gate. Nix looked up and smiled. "Good morning, David. Yes, I find the mornings here refreshing. How about you? Are you settling into the day?" "Just getting started," David chuckled. I see you're into gardening. It's a peaceful hobby. It helps me connect with this new place, she explained, standing up and wiping her hands on her jeans. Do you garden? Not really. My plants usually don't survive long, David admitted with a grin. Maybe you can give me some tips sometime. I'd be happy to, Nix replied warmly. David noticed a subtle scent in the air, a sweet, almost intoxicating aroma that seemed to emanate from Nix. He found himself taking a deep breath, the fragrance soothing yet oddly powerful. What's that smell? It's really nice. Oh, that might be the phlox. They're quite fragrant this time of year, Nix said, gesturing to the purple flowers nearby. Must be. David nodded, though a part of him wondered if the scent came from the flowers alone. Changing the topic, Nix looked around David's garden, which was visible from where they stood. You have a nice space. Maybe with a little care, it could really flourish. Yeah, maybe I should take gardening up seriously, David mused. Hey, would you like to come over for coffee sometime? Maybe you can share some of your gardening secrets then. That sounds lovely. I would like that, Nix replied, her eyes meeting his. They agreed to meet the following weekend. As David walked back home, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Nix than met the eye. The scent, her calm demeanor, and her immediate acceptance into the neighborhood. It all seemed too seamless. Throughout the week, David found himself watching Nix from his window. She seemed to fit perfectly into her new surroundings, always calm and composed. However, the sweet scent that seemed to linger whenever he was near her began to invade his senses even in his own home. It was disconcerting how calming he found it, how it seemed to dull his usual alertness. On the day of their coffee meeting, David prepared his house, trying to make it as welcoming as possible. Nix arrived on time, dressed casually, her hair flowing freely. She brought a small plant as a gift, a peace lily. Thank you, Nix. This is really thoughtful, David said, accepting the plant. I hope it thrives here. Peace lilies are resilient, she smiled. As they sat down with their coffee, David decided to probe a little. So, Nix, what brings you to our little town? It's not exactly a hub of activity. Nix paused, her expression unreadable for a moment. I needed a change, a place to start anew. Life can get overwhelming, and sometimes a quiet place helps put things in perspective. David nodded, sensing there was more she wasn't saying. I understand that. This town is good for quiet, that's for sure. They spent the next couple of hours talking about various things, books, music, the stars. Yet, David's mind kept returning to the mysterious scent and Nix's serene demeanor. He wondered what secrets lay beneath her tranquil surface. What past was she trying to escape? And most importantly, what brought her to his doorstep? Over the following days, David's fascination with Nix grew into an uneasy obsession. He noticed the calming scent was not just in her presence, but seemed to linger in his thoughts, disrupting his usual routines. His nights were restless, filled with dreams where Nix's silver eyes seemed to beckon him into deeper mysteries. Compelled by a mix of intrigue and suspicion, David decided to do some digging. His old contacts from his military days were useful for more than just reminiscing about the past. He reached out discreetly, looking to uncover anything about Nix's origins or her species. His friend, Mark, a veteran who now worked in intelligence, met him at a local diner with a folder thick with data. David, this isn't just casual curiosity, is it? Mark asked, sliding the folder across the table. David opened the folder to find detailed reports on various alien species known to interact with humans. None matched Nix's description. It's hard to explain, Mark. There's something about her that doesn't sit right. It's like she's here for a reason, and I can't figure it out. Mark leaned in, lowering his voice. Be careful, Dave. Some of these species are known to use biological tricks. Pheromones, hypnotic effects. You might be under an influence without even realizing it. The idea struck a chord in David. It could explain the uncharacteristic calm, the constant thoughts of Nix, the strange pull he felt towards her. He thanked Mark and headed home, his mind racing with possibilities. Back at home, David pored over the information again, searching for any mention of pheromone manipulation. His suspicion turned into alarm when he stumbled across a classified report about a covert alien faction using biological agents to manipulate emotions and behaviors in humans, agents that could be very similar to what he was experiencing. That night, Nix invited him over for dinner. David accepted, his resolve strengthened by his need to confront her. As he walked to her house, he rehearsed what he would say, how he would demand the truth. Nix greeted him with her usual serene smile, and that unsettling yet alluring scent wafted stronger than ever. As they sat down to eat, David couldn't help but feel his resolve weakening. He needed to confront her now. "Nix," David began, his voice firm despite the calming haze clouding his mind, "I need to know why you're really here. This isn't just about escaping your past, is it?" Nix's expression faltered slightly, her eyes widening in what seemed like genuine surprise. "David, she started but then paused, looking down at her hands. "I felt different since you moved in," David pressed on. "Distracted. Calm in ways that don't make sense. It's like I'm being pulled into your world against my will." Nix sighed, her shoulders slumping as if a weight had been placed upon them. "I didn't want this. You have to believe me. Where I come from, we don't have much choice in what we are or what we can do. Yes, my body produces pheromones, but I cannot control them. They affect others, yes, but never have I wanted to harm anyone with it." David studied her, torn between his trained suspicion and the empathy he felt for her plight. "So, you're saying you're not here to manipulate us? To prepare us for something worse?" "No, David, I swear to you," Nix pleaded. "I'm here because I had no other place to go. My kind, we are used by others because of what we can do. I ran away because I didn't want to be a tool in someone else's scheme." David leaned back, the tension in his body slowly ebbing as he listened to her. Her words rang with a sincerity that was hard to deny, and he found himself wanting to believe her. But he knew better than to take anything at face value, especially when it came to alien interactions. "I want to believe you, Nix, but I need proof. I need to know that you're not a threat," David said, his voice steady but compassionate. Nix nodded, a faint smile of relief crossing her features. "I'll do whatever it takes to earn your trust, David. You have my word." As David left her house that evening, he felt a mix of caution and a newfound sense of connection. Nix's story had opened his eyes to a complex reality, one where not every alien was an enemy, but also a reminder that the universe was far more intricate and intertwined than he had ever imagined. In the days following their dinner, David wrestled with his instincts. His military training screamed for caution, yet Nix's candid confession and her apparent vulnerability stirred something else in him, a protective impulse he hadn't felt in years. David decided he needed definitive proof of Nix's intentions. Late one evening, he ventured into her yard, equipped with a device Mark had lent him, designed to detect alien technology or unusual biological signatures. If Nix was as innocent as she claimed, the device would come up clean. As he neared her house, the device began to emit a soft, steady beep, indicating something was amiss. David's pulse quickened as he followed the signal to a small shed at the back of Nix's garden. The beeping intensified as he approached, and with a deep breath, he prepared to confront whatever lay inside. But before he could reach the shed, a voice stopped him in his tracks. "Looking for something, David?" Nix stood in the doorway of her house, her silver eyes reflecting the moonlight, giving her an ethereal glow. David turned, the device in his hand. "I need to know the truth, Nix. Are you hiding something here?" Nix sighed, stepping toward him. "I knew this might happen. I know you have reasons to doubt me, David. Let me show you. Please." Her tone was calm, almost resigned. Reluctantly, David followed her to the shed. Inside, he found not weapons or spying equipment, but a small, intricate device emitting a low hum. "What is this?" he asked, his voice laced with suspicion. "It's a communicator," Nix explained. I use it to check if I'm still being hunted. I told you, I ran away. This is my only link to what I left behind, to ensure they're not coming for me. David examined the device more closely with his scanner. It confirmed Nix's words. It was a communication tool, not a weapon. His shoulders sagged slightly, relief mixed with lingering doubt. Why keep this a secret? If you knew I was still in contact with my world, would you trust me? Would anyone? Nix's voice was soft, her gaze steady on him. David knew she had a point. His own fear and bias could have clouded his judgment. I want to trust you, Nix, but everything is so complex when it comes to us and your kind. I know, Nix replied. I wish things could be different. Their conversation continued long into the night, under the stars. Nix spoke of her home planet, of the oppression her people faced, and of her desperate flight to Earth. David listened, his earlier suspicions slowly melting away as he saw the person behind the alien facade. I want to help you, Nix. Maybe together we can figure out a way to keep you safe, David offered, his voice sincere. Nix looked at him, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Thank you, David. Having an ally means more than you can imagine. As David walked back to his house, he felt a shift in his perception. Nix wasn't just a mysterious alien with potentially dangerous pheromones. She was a refugee fighting for her freedom and safety. Maybe, he thought, not all battles were fought on the front lines. Some were quieter, more personal, and just as important to win. The newfound alliance between David and Nix grew stronger with each passing day. David's knowledge of military tactics and his strategic mind, combined with Nix's insights into alien technologies, proved to be a formidable duo. Together, they started working on strengthening Nix's defenses, should her past ever catch up to her. But peace was short-lived. One quiet evening, as David was leaving Nix's house, the serene night was shattered by the roar of engines overhead. Military drones, sleek and menacing, hovered above, their searchlights sweeping the area. David, inside now! Nix shouted, pulling him back towards the house as the front yard erupted in chaos. Soldiers rappelled from the drones, surrounding the house with practiced efficiency. They were not just any soldiers. These were elite units, specifically trained to handle alien encounters. Nix, they found you, David said, his voice tight with concern as they barricaded themselves inside. It's not me they're after, Nix replied, her face pale but composed. It's us. They think we're collaborating against Earth's interests. How did they even know to come here? David wondered aloud, peeking through the curtains. The soldiers were setting up a perimeter, cutting off any chance of escape. I may have underestimated how closely they monitor me, Nix admitted, her tone tinged with regret. Or there's a traitor among your contacts. With little time to ponder the betrayal, David sprang into action. We need to hold them off. Give me access to your tech. I can modify their frequencies, disorient them for a while. Nix hesitated for a moment, then nodded, leading David to a hidden panel behind a bookshelf. She quickly keyed in a sequence, revealing a cache of alien devices. These can disrupt their communications and sensors temporarily, she explained, handing him a small, intricate device. David took it, his fingers working quickly to adjust the settings. Cover me, he instructed as he moved towards the back door. Together, they executed a risky maneuver. David stepped outside, using the device to send out a high-frequency pulse. The immediate area buzzed with interference, causing the drones to falter and the soldiers to clutch their heads in momentary confusion. Move! David yelled, grabbing Nix's arm as they dashed through the disoriented soldiers towards the woods behind her house. The woods provided temporary cover, allowing them to catch their breath. We can't keep running, Nix panted, leaning against a tree. They'll regroup and come after us even harder. David knew she was right. We need a plan, a way to prove that we're not enemies of Earth. But first, we need to get out of their reach. As they moved deeper into the forest, David's mind raced. They needed allies, someone on the inside who could help clear their names, and maybe even turn the tide in their favor. We need to contact Mark, David decided. He might be our only chance to get out of this mess. Nix nodded, trusting his judgment. Together, they navigated through the underbrush, making their way to a location where Nix had previously stashed a secure communications device. With each step, the weight of their predicament grew heavier, but so did their resolve to see it through together. In the shadows of the looming trees, their alliance solidified under the shared goal of survival, not just for themselves, but potentially for the peaceful coexistence of their two worlds. David and Nix, having barely escaped the military onslaught, found themselves navigating through less familiar terrain, under the canopy of an ancient forest that offered a temporary sanctuary. The night enveloped them, making the path ahead uncertain and fraught with potential dangers. "We need to keep moving," David urged, his voice low as they paused by a stream to refill their water supplies. "We can't risk using any tech here. They might be tracking electronic signals." Nix nodded, her face set with determination. "I know a place, an old research facility I learned about when I first arrived. It's abandoned but should have the basics we need to lay low and plan our next steps." They moved swiftly, avoiding open spaces and using the natural cover of the terrain. As they traveled, Nix shared more about the facility. It's off-grid, designed for confidential projects. Not even the local government knows of its existence. "Sounds perfect," David replied, though he kept his senses sharp for any signs of pursuit. After hours of trekking through dense underbrush and over rugged hills, they arrived at the derelict facility just as dawn was breaking. The building was camouflaged with overgrowth, its once modern facade now weathered by time and neglect. David examined the perimeter, while Nix worked on the old security system. With a soft click, the door unlocked, revealing a dusty, still air that spoke of years without human presence. They stepped inside, securing the door behind them. "This will work," David said, surveying the dim interior, illuminated only by the light filtering through dirty windows. "We can set up here for now." They spent the day setting up their makeshift base, cleaning up enough space to live and work in. David found old power generators and, with some effort, got them running, providing them with electricity and heat. As they settled in, their conversation turned to their next moves. "We need to contact your friend Mark," Nix reminded him. "If we're going to clear our names and expose the truth, we'll need his help." David set up a secure line, using old but reliable tech that wouldn't be easily traced. He contacted Mark, explaining their situation in hushed tones. "We're being framed, Mark. They think we're collaborating against Earth, but we're trying to stop a bigger threat." Mark was silent for a moment before responding. "I understand, David. I'll do what I can from here. Stay low, and I'll get back to you with a plan." With Mark on their side, David felt a glimmer of hope. But as the days turned into weeks, their situation grew more desperate. Supplies were running low, and the isolation took its toll. Nix, however, grew more resolved. "We can use this time to gather more evidence against those who are truly threatening Earth. My communicator can intercept transmissions. We might catch something useful," she suggested one evening, her fingers deftly adjusting the device. David watched her, impressed by her expertise and grateful for her presence. "That's a good idea. Anything that helps us get a clearer picture of what we're up against." Late one night, their persistence paid off. Nix intercepted a transmission, revealing a covert meeting between high-ranking military officials and representatives of a hostile alien faction. The recording was damning, outlining a plan to manipulate Earth's defenses and pave the way for an invasion. "This is it," David said, listening to the playback. "This is the proof we need. But we have to get this information to the right people. People who will actually do something with it." Nix nodded. "We'll need to be careful. This kind of information could make us even bigger targets." David agreed. "Once we get this out, we'll have to move again. Be ready to leave at a moment's notice." Using encrypted channels, David sent the recording to Mark, instructing him to use it to rally support within the government and military, those who hadn't been corrupted. They prepared to evacuate, destroying any evidence of their presence in the facility. Before they could leave, however, they received a message from Mark. "The recording is causing waves, David. There's going to be an internal investigation, but you need to come in now. It's only a matter of time before they trace the leak back to you." With no time to waste, David and Nix packed up their few belongings and set out once again, this time to meet with Mark and other allies who had agreed to help expose the conspiracy. The journey back was tense, with every shadow and noise making them jump. They traveled by night, avoiding any areas that seemed too exposed. As they neared the rendezvous point, Nix looked at David. "Whatever happens, I want you to know, I'm grateful for everything you've done." David smiled, squeezing her hand. "We're in this together, Nix. Whatever comes, we face it as a team." Their bond, formed under the strain of survival and sealed by shared secrets, had grown strong. Together, they stepped into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, united by a common cause and a deep, unspoken trust. David and Nix arrived at the designated rendezvous point, a secluded warehouse on the outskirts of the city, just before dawn. The air was thick with tension, and each shadow seemed to move with the weight of potential threats. Mark was already there, waiting with a small team of trusted allies. "David, Nix, you made it," Mark greeted them, his expression grave. "The situation is more volatile than we anticipated. The recording has stirred up a hornet's nest." "What's the status?" David asked, his eyes scanning the dimly lit surroundings for any signs of danger. "Some high-ranking officers are being questioned, and there's talk of court-martials. But there's also a backlash. Those implicated are desperate and dangerous," Mark explained. He looked particularly at Nix. "They know an alien was involved in leaking the information. They're scrambling to track you down." Nix nodded, her face set with a calm determination. "We expected this. What's our next move?" "We need to get you two to a secure location while things settle. There's a safe house in the north, hard to trace, well guarded," Mark suggested. As they discussed their next steps, a sudden noise from the warehouse entrance startled them. Within seconds, the area was swarming with armed agents. It was an ambush. "They've found us!" one of Mark's men shouted. The group sprang into action, returning fire and taking cover. David and Nix found themselves back-to-back, fighting off the attackers. "We can't stay here," David yelled over the gunfire. Nix, realizing the gravity of their predicament, made a split-second decision. "David, go with Mark. I'll cover you." "No, Nix, you're coming with us," David protested, but Nix pushed him towards Mark. "There's no time to argue. My presence here only puts you all in greater danger." "I'll hold them off and follow when I can," Nix insisted, her voice carrying a finality that brooked no argument. Reluctantly, David nodded, understanding the sacrifice she was making. As he retreated with Mark's team, Nix turned to face the incoming wave of agents. Using a combination of her alien technology and tactical prowess, she created a diversion, manipulating her pheromones to disorient the attackers temporarily. The last thing David saw as he was led away was Nix, standing alone against a backdrop of chaos, fighting fiercely to protect the chance they had all taken. Hours later, at the safe house, David was restless, pacing back and forth, waiting for any word on Nix. The phone finally rang, and he rushed to answer it, only to receive the heart-dropping news. Nix had been captured. They're holding her at a high-security facility. They plan to use her as an example, Mark revealed, his tone heavy with regret. David's mind raced with guilt and fear for Nix. "We can't let that happen. We have to rescue her." Mark nodded, understanding the depth of David's resolve. "We'll need a plan, something clever and fast. She saved us back there. Now it's our turn to return the favor." The chapter closes with David, fueled by a tumultuous mix of emotions, gratitude, fear, determination, preparing to undertake a dangerous mission to save Nix. Her sacrifice had not only saved their lives, but had also solidified a bond that David now realized was worth fighting for, no matter the cost. David's mind raced as he and Mark's team planned the rescue operation. Time was against them, with Nix being held in a facility rumored to be impregnable. Every second she was there increased the risk of her being transferred, or worse, executed as a warning to others. The plan they devised was audacious and relied heavily on stealth and precision. Using a combination of hacked security codes and insider information from sympathetic contacts, they aimed to infiltrate the facility under the cover of night. David was at the forefront, driven by a deep resolve to save the alien who had become his unexpected ally and friend. As they approached the facility, the night was eerily silent, the darkness a cloak that masked their movements. The team split into groups, with David leading the assault team directly into the heart of the complex. Each member was acutely aware of the stakes. They were not just fighting for Nix, but for the truth she represented. Inside, they navigated the cold, sterile corridors, Mark's intel guiding them past security checkpoints and through restricted areas. The tension was palpable, every shadow and sound magnified by the high stakes of their mission. Finally, they reached the detention wing, where Nix was being held. David's heart pounded as he used a stolen key card to open her cell. Inside, Nix was sitting quietly, her demeanor calm but her eyes reflecting the fierce spirit within. "David," she whispered, relief flooding her features as she saw him. "We're getting you out of here," David assured her, cutting the restraints that bound her. As they made their escape, the facility's alarms blared, casting an ominous sound to the hallways. Reinforcements poured in, and a fierce confrontation ensued. Nix, despite her weakened state, fought alongside David, her alien abilities creating disarray among their pursuers. The team used every tactic at their disposal to fend off the security forces, moving towards the extraction point where a vehicle waited to whisk them away to safety. As they neared the exit, a sudden barrage of gunfire pinned them down. "Go! I'll cover!" Nix shouted, standing her ground as the others dashed for the vehicle. David hesitated, torn between his mission to protect Nix and her insistent sacrifice. Realizing they would all be lost if he didn't comply, he gave her a determined nod and joined the others, diving into the vehicle as it sped away. As they escaped, David watched through the rear window as Nix was overwhelmed by the security forces, her figure disappearing amongst the chaos. The vehicle turned a corner, and she was gone from sight, leaving a hollow feeling in David's chest. Back at the safe house, the weight of Nix's sacrifice hung heavily in the air. The team was safe because of her, but at a tremendous cost. David's mind replayed every moment of their last encounter, her bravery, her resolve to protect their mission. In the days that followed, David worked with Mark and the others to disseminate the information Nix had helped uncover. The exposure of the conspiracy led to public outcry and significant shifts within the government and military, shaking the very foundations of the interstellar conflict. As Earth's defenses strengthened and reforms began taking root, David couldn't help but feel a bittersweet victory. Nix's sacrifice had sparked a change, one that would hopefully lead to a future where such sacrifices were no longer necessary. The war was far from over, but David had found something worth fighting for, a future where humanity stood strong, informed by the courage and sacrifice of those like Nix, who had dared to cross the vast divide between worlds to stand for truth and justice.